I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the book study. Let's look at the journey we've taken so far. Step 4 is this deep, rigorous emotional house cleaning. And why do we do that? To uncover, to reveal the truth about our resentments, fears, harm, sex conduct. That truth we discover is that they're driven by misdirected instinct. We start to figure that out. In 5, thanks to the assistance of another person who's experienced this process, and of course, God. And we get to know God more in this 5th step, but we discover which, what does that mean? To become aware. Awareness starts to happen. We discover that these instincts have controlled all our thinking, all our, and created every obstacle that's ever been between us and God. And thanks to that new awareness, awakening slowly happens. And so we're armed with those facts about ourselves. We sit down and we ask God to discard these, to let God take them, to discard them, actually. Discard means to be rid of something undesirable. Excuse me. So our defects in 6 and 7, that leads, discarding of our defects in 6, and that leads to spiritual cleansing. So the question I have, if I uncover the truth about my thinking, discover what drove my thinking, and discard my thinking, wouldn't it make sense to go out and repair the destruction my thinking has created? It would make all the sense in the world. That cleansing in 6 and 7 spearheads, propels us to the outside world and to repair the damages we have done in step 9. Repair means, of course, to fix. It also means to mend. Very important. Making amends is like a natural reaction when discovering God. I hurt people because I was living on self-will. So I need to go out and fix the things and need to make these amends. Let's go to page 76. Page 76. Well, so here's another time frame it starts off with. Well, let's look at the previous paragraph. We see the 7-step prayer. And what does it say at the end of the 7-step prayer? We completed step 7. So there's a time frame, right? There's a time frame. We completed step 7. Very important. And then we have, it says, now we need more action. Kind of a time frame there too. And every time we think we can put our feet up and relax in this program, it says more action, keep going. So now we need more action, without which we find faith without works is dead. So we've heard that before, like in Bill's story and a couple other times. It basically means faith without action is dead. You could say knowing without action is dead. Knowing God. So let's look at, it says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons, not some, all persons we have harmed, and to whom we are willing, and that means it's a condition, that means ready to make amends. So he's telling us we need to be willing before we go make these amends, not just go make the amends because, my sponsor says I have to, and I want to wring that guy's neck. We'll get more into that in a little bit, because it does say we go to the person in the forgiving spirit. It says we made it when we took inventory. So we take our list, take our inventory and move it over to this list. We subject ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. That's step 4 and 5. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damages done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which accumulate out of our effort. Not a very good effort. Not a successful effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If you want to see the examples of those, after the meeting, go to page 52 and read the bedevilments. That's a great example of living self-will and running the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, here's a prayer. We ask until it comes. That's the 8-step willingness prayer. It's also the second part of step 8. the willingness to make amends. We'll get to that in a minute too. But whenever you see the word prayer, ask in here, it means pray. So God, please help me be willing to make these amends is a simple prayer they're asking us here. Very similar to the 6-step prayer we mentioned last week. If we still cling to something, we'll not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. Why are we asking God to help us be willing? Because how long have we been unwilling for? And Bill knows that this is our only chance to think about it. Because you know how it can be. Some of us aren't here very long if we don't get rolling. Now look at this last line. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning. That's walking into the door. That's sitting down with our sponsor. Agreed at the beginning to go to any lengths for victory of alcohol. Maybe that beginning was you just sitting in rehab or sitting at home, knowing you just detoxed or whatever, and you just go, I got to go to any lengths this time. I heard about it before. I've been there before. So it's reminding us not only why we walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever we walked in from, but why we did the steps to begin with, to conquer this disease, conquer alcohol, conquer drugs. We want victory. Remember what it says in 44? We're suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. An old timer told me once, victory is the chase of victory that gets you through this stuff. And I was like, then why does it say we're suffering from an illness which a spiritual experience will conquer? As it says. So we'll get into that. We'll be seeing that again. Amends was one of the original 6 steps of AA, but its roots go all the way back to the Oxford group. So it is what spearheaded the actual Oxford group movement. And we went over this at the very beginning of the book, so I'll go over it again. Frank Bookman was the head of a kind of like a YMCA type place. And also had like a hospice in there too as well. And he was running it. And what happened is basically got arguing with the other board members. And even though he created it, he was asked to leave. That happens sometimes. And angry, losing what he had created, angry at the board members for kicking him out. You can imagine. So he finally goes, you know what, this Keswick convention in England is coming up. I'm going to go to Keswick. It still exists to this day. And he went there for one thing, to hear a guy named F.B. Mayer speak, who was a famous writer of that time, F.B. Mayer. And I can't remember the woman's name, but who he wound up hearing because he had the wrong days mixed up and like 15 people were there. But he sat through it anyways. This woman talked about making amends for resentment. Very interesting. You don't hear that mentioned a lot. Making amends for resentment. And she suggested if you have resentment, go home and write letters of restitution to those people. A little bit different the way we look at it. But anyways, I'm going to read directly what Bookman said. Think of this. This is when he wrote the letters. I thought of the 6 men from the board who wronged me. I then saw at that moment that I was the 7th wronged man. I began to see myself as God saw me, which was a very different picture than the one I had of myself. I can only tell you, I sat there and realized how my wrongs, my pride, my selfishness, my ill will had eclipsed me from God. I saw my resentments against these men standing out like tombstones in my heart. I asked God to change me, and he told me to put things right with these men. I wrote 6 letters of restitution to the board members. It produced in me a vibrant feeling as though a strong current life had suddenly been poured into me. Afterward, a dazed sense of great spiritual shakeup. Not soon after, I started taking others through surrender, confession of sin, restitution, and asking God's guidance. See how it spearheaded. He also had the absolutes, absolute honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. So he started working these absolutes with people. When he discovered if a person had wrongs in the past, that these absolutes were impossible. So, they called it restitution, became their thing. And so they had the 5 procedures, and the 5 procedures he met Sam Shoemaker, and Shoemaker's actually the one that wrote them. but the first one is surrender our past and present and future into God's keeping and direction. And the second one was sharing our sins and temptations with another given to God. The third one, restitution to all those we've harmed directly and indirectly. 4, listening for God's guidance and carrying it out, like step 11. And this one sounds familiar too. Keep the conversion experience real by carrying the Oxford Group message of salvation to others. So that's the interesting thing is restitution, he calls it, is the action of making right or wrong, returning something to a former owner, something that may have been stolen before broken. That's just the way people looked at it at that time. But it means to make right or wrong. It's the same thing as amends. Bill liked the word amends better, and here's why. Restitution, while they, like I said, they both mean the same thing, it had something else in there, an element that they pushed, and it's reconciliation. And Bill was kind of, it meant making right the wrong, but also restoring a relationship with the person. And Bill thought pressure to the alcoholic, and you also have to remember is the OG members, Oxford Group members, their list wasn't as long as the drunks because they were normies. They weren't that long, maybe even 5 people. We had super long list. And Bill thought restoring our past relationship with another reconciliation should be just left up to God alone, left it up to the universe. So, the thing is, to keep it simple, he used the word amends. I'm going to put up on the slide here where we're at. So this is step 8. And it's very cut and dry. I mean, it says, made a list of all the persons we harmed and became willing to make amends to them all, make amends to them all. First of all, I didn't say become willing to make amends to them all. But amends means, of course, to make right the wrong. And here's the thing is, when people look at step 8, they only see the first part of it. The second part, which you just mentioned a minute ago, is they mentioned in that prayer, the list, to become willing to make amends to them all, everyone. That's something we pray for, right? Something we pray for. And the important thing here is when Bill wrote this on the yellow sheet of paper at Clinton Street, where he lived, an apartment in Clinton Street, and he prayed to expand the 6 steps into 12. There was amends in there, but when he read this to the group, made a list of all people we harmed, became willing to make amends to them all, they thought that was the amends step. Then the next thing he reads step 9, they're like, wait a minute, you have 2. And Bill goes, no, he goes, we don't want these guys to escape from somewhere. We want them to look at this, make the list, and then remind them, may direct them in. It's just the magic of the steps. And when people look at, this, it's very important to understand what that list looks like. And so we're going to go to page 83 in the 3rd paragraph. I kind of go backwards a lot in this stuff, if you haven't recognized. So we're going to look at, and the 12 and 12 has some pretty good stuff too, but I stick to, to here what, because it is a big book study. And I do use 12 and 12 a bit, but I don't like to make the list, the amends list super category super crazy. I'm going to close it up for now. So let's look at this. It says, page 83, 3rd paragraph, there may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves, this is about being honest with ourselves, that we would right them if we could. Now, you hear this in the fellowship a lot. Many people say, well, it says in the big book, there's wrongs, that I can never right. So I can just go throw them to the, kick them to the curb. It says fully right. That's the inner message here. Fully right. Fully right. That's because that's not what it does not say never right. It says never fully right. example, let's say I hustle Kim out of $100,000, right? I can't make it fully right with him in the amends, but I could say, here's 300 and I'll pay you back in increments, whatever, or this is the best I can do. This is all the money I got, whatever, something like that. I won't ever have $1 million to pay him back. So it's the best intentions. People read this and say, I'm going to go make a living amends. This is where it kind of derives from. And I don't believe there's such thing as living amends. It's just a way out of making face-to-face direct amends. I don't know how, so people say, I don't know. Well, people will say, I don't know how to make amends to my dad. So I don't want to make amends to him. So I'm going to go cook him breakfast every week or something like that. That's something I should be doing anyhow, maybe, it's just things, like that. Practicing the principles in all our affairs is what it is. But here me give you a good example. Let's say I stole Kicken's $5,000 bike, $500 bike, let's just say. So I go up to her and say, sorry, I'm making amends to you. I'm not going to steal bikes anymore. And she's like, well, that doesn't replace her bike. I've heard people do this stuff. Charlie P., one of my favorite speakers, he mentions a story of a woman that stole, oh God, it was like a ton of money from a bank she worked at, while working, skimming off the money. And then she said, now she's working in a bank, she's making a living amends. So she's, by not stealing anymore, that's not making it right. That's not going to any lengths. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't know. Let's see what else it says. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. That's the deceased. We'll get more into that in a minute. And look at this. This is very important. There may be valid reason for postponement in some cases. And we know what those are, but we don't want to use those as an escape clause either, right? So, but look, here's the condition. We do not delay them if it can be avoided. But we call those unwilling, not ready. We'll talk about those in a second. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, humble, without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anybody. Yeah, I don't think making a living amends is really standing on my feet and doing this. So I'm going to put up the 4 categories of amends sheets. And I just want to say before this is my experience. You might do it differently. I'm not trying to change how you do it or anything like that. This is just the way I've done it. And I did something similar to this at the beginning, but over the years of sponsoring, I don't know, like the last 14 or 15 years, this is what I've been using with sponsees, and it seems to really work. So the first one you see is willing, right? And so you see 3 categories. You put the name on here, who you're willing to make amends to. So I go make amends and blah, 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 how I can make it right. And I write what the person said and action to complete the amends. Now, willing means ready, eager, inclined, and prepared to do something. The ones I can do now, the ones I know I can go do now, the ones I'm comfortable with doing, the ones I want to do. A recurring problem I've seen people, ask the person how they can make it right. Person tells them and it just crossed off the list, and the amends isn't complete. We take, if I go to Kevin and I say to him, how can I make it right? And he says, well, hey man, just let's hang out sometimes. So I'm going to write on there, let's hang out 5 times or something like that. I want to complete that amends. I write when it's completed, but all we've done is gathered information, how to make the amends. If we don't do that, that's not a completed amends. So that's that one. This is my favorite one, unwilling. I used to do this one more verbally, and they would just write the names. But then I got a better response from guys when I sent, or women I sponsor, and they write the names down they're unwilling to make amends to, and it's usually with a growl, right? And then they have to explain why. And so they come with this whole list filled out. And unwilling means not ready, not eager, not inclined, and not prepared to do it. And, so unwilling amends, I'm not ready to make these amends. Or maybe perhaps they need to be deferred because of circumstances, real circumstances, not excuses. But we pray for the willingness to do these unwilling ones. That's the trick. We want to become willing. And so what happens usually is the sponsee will write, I can't make, I owe amends to brother Jim, right? Unwilling to make, I don't want to be around him. Or they say, my old boss, where he stole money from or something. I might get in trouble. And they have all these little short sentences. And as they read 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of them, they all stop at me and look at me and goes, these sound kind of stupid, don't they? They don't, they realize it, they get it, and that's it. But here's what happens. I mean, is the unwilling, after I make a bunch of these willing ones, to say I make the first 6 out of 15 on here or something, all of a sudden the unwilling start to float over there unknowingly. You might be driving down the street, they're making really good amends, and there's that unwilling guy, and you don't even think about it's unwilling, you go do it. That's the beauty of this. So let's go to page 78. And we're going to look at this one. And it's just ones that people don't like. And a lot of it's just not on our 4th step. We don't think about it. Sometimes people put it on there. Sometimes it's a derivative of, alimony and stuff like that, and a harm or something. But call this one Creditors Payback. And let's see what it says in here. And this is a big surprise. Most alcoholics owe money, right? We do not dodge our creditors. So what is a creditor? This is roughly written in 37, came out 39. A creditor is a person or institution to which a commitment, we'll call it a promise, of debt is owed. Maybe a bank, maybe a friend, maybe a sister, maybe a brother, maybe anything. And I want to say this off bat. There's no difference between stealing money off my mother's dresser and not paying her back a promised loan. They're both stealing. So if you don't think you stole, but you have all these loans you promise to pay back, creditors and stuff like that, and you're in debt, that's stealing. It's still stealing. If you made arrangements and broke that, that's dishonesty. And you can't be dishonest and God reliant at the same time. We're trying to get something here. Let's see what this book says. Telling them what we're trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking. Guess what? They usually know it anyhow. No way. Yeah, that's true. They do. Don't ask me how, but they do. Whether we think so or not, nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory. We love theories, right? That's something we haven't experienced. It may cause financial harm. So we don't base stuff on theories anymore. Oh, I can't do that because it's going to harm. You don't know that. A theory is anything we haven't experienced. Approaching it this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. And this happened to me. Arranging the best deal, we can let these people know we're sorry. Our drinking made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors, no matter how far we have to go. We're liable to drink if we're afraid of them. I have known several people who, while I've been sober and sponsoring some of them, were doing the steps and never made right with those they owed money to. And they walked into recovery in severe credit card debt, but to wait to 7 years for it to float away. That's not making amends. And I have known people as well, after doing their 5th step, decided to declare bankruptcy because oh my God, I owe too much money. That's not making it right. I've known people that owed tons of money to their parents. And just because the relationship is better, I don't have to pay them back anymore. That's not making it right. I've known people that never paid their child support, even after they were summoned for it, sober. That's not making it right. And I've known people that owed money to former drug dealers, but I can't go. The rehab told me I can't go back to those bad neighborhoods. That's not making it right. and this is one for me, is I know people that stole from stores because of fear of going back to those such places. They never paid it back. It's not making it right. Notice I said known people, past tense. I don't see them around the rooms anymore. And I can guarantee 3 of them were my friends and they're deceased. I buried them. I've never known people achieve long-term sobriety without making amends, especially financial amends. Rigorous honesty. You know, perhaps if you can't make these amends, maybe these steps aren't for you. That's just the way. That's brutally honest right there. But all these people I mentioned have one thing in common: they lack the capacity, to be honest with themselves in a program that demands rigorous honesty. So the next one, we're going to go with people who cannot be seen. Oh, let me describe this creditors one here. So you just put the credit on here. It doesn't matter who it is: institution, drug dealer, friend, family member. Some of these you have to wait for the right time, the right amount of money, the right this, the right that. But the more you grow, the more you do it, especially when you start sponsoring and you realize you're telling your sponsees to do the same thing. But you write down the payback agreement, date completed. There's some people I sponsored who got 6 or 7 years and they're still working on this one. There's nothing wrong with that. And they're willing to make amends. That's the important thing. No physical contact, those that cannot be seen. Oh, so many say, I wish I could make amends to my son or mother, but they passed. Maybe there was a person in their life that no longer is here. They just loved and they want to make amends. Thanks to this process, we can make amends to those who are no longer here. There's no feeling like telling a person they can do that. My sponsor, I told him about my grandmother, and I'll just give you a background real quick. I'll tell the amends story. Is my grandmother pretty much raised me, and she also was the first person that like looked at my arms and was like, "Hey, what's these little marks on your arms?" And I'm like, "Oh, I fell into a tree." She's all, "Bullshit, you're doing drugs," And she's like, straight up called me on it. She would let me in her house. I had to sleep on the floor. You can't sleep on my couch. But she also had these books on famous people like Yogananda and stuff, and want me to read them and stuff. And I never understood why. I know I had a connection with her. And I told my sponsor, I wish I could make amends to her. And he goes, "What if," he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "What if I told you you can?" And I never forget, it was like time stood still when he said that. So what happened was, when I got to my amends, I'm going a little further ahead because I'll tell more amends stories later, but I had to tell this now, is I went to our fishing hole and I wrote one letter that basically was just a State of the Union. You don't have to do that, but I did. And one letter that was, "Hey, Grandma, in the past with you, I was selfish and self-seeking and dishonest. What can I do to make it right?" And it was real windy out there. And I get there, and this happened to a lot of my amends. There's someone fishing there. Just like I go to make amends at the store where no one ever is, and there's a line, and I was told, when you're there, you stay until you make amends for those type of amends. And I waited 6 hours till those guys left, and I sat down by our fishing hole, and it was windy, and I held up the letters, and they blew away in the wind. And I'm like, "Oh shit, what do I do now?" And I just closed my eyes, and I felt her presence. And I told her how I was doing and everything like that. And remember, I said before I made this, the water was choppy, the winds were going everywhere. And I said, "What can I do to make it right?" The thought just hit me right between the eyes, a very significant place, right in the third eye, I expect. It was like, stay right with God. It's not something I would say, especially that early in recovery. And then I opened my eyes and the water was crystal smooth. You can't, where else is that going to happen? It's not going to happen anywhere outside of AA. So we got our list. If anyone wants the copies of those sheets, let me know. They're just a different way of looking at it, and what's worked, with sponsees of mine and myself. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so injure them or others. Now, I think some of you know my pet peeves with this line in this book, wherever, because I'll get there in a second. Because, well, first of all, direct amends, what does that mean? Does it mean call them on the phone? Does it mean go on Zoom and make an amends? Direct amends means face to face. Now, you can make an amends to like a family member on the phone if they live far away, but I would highly recommend, well, I tell my sponsees, you have to be willing to go do it in face to face eventually, if you need to do it right away. So face to face, very important. But as we know, amends means to make right or wrong. But at your next, I'm not going to say book study because you're not going to hear it, or a solution-based meeting, but a regular AA meeting, count how many times the reader will read whenever possible when they read back step 9. That's what they see. Whenever is just a time. It says wherever. Wherever is a time and a place. You know, something done to, you know, that's, I do it in a time. Remember, there's a time and place for everything, right? There's always a time and place to make amends. So here's the cold reality of this. Not many are going to make their amends. Matter of fact, from my experience, and this comes from my grand sponsor and his sponsor saying this stuff, the top cause for relapse for those who do the steps, or were doing the steps, is not making amends. And I come from a sponsorship line, and if you're not making amends, they say, why aren't you doing the steps anymore? You know, and this, the second most common relapse for those doing the steps that relapse, step 10, not doing step 10. And the third most common is not sponsoring. And the last one is leaving stuff out of 4 and 5. And that slowly, gradually gets to you. But if I'm leaving stuff out of 4 and 5, isn't that skipping on the 9th step anyways? You know, I don't include 4 in there necessarily, because if we skip 4, we never really did the 3rd step prayer. 3rd step prayer is only real once we start writing the 4th step. You know, what's the main reason people skip step 4? Afraid of making amends. What's the main reason people don't want to do the steps at all? Afraid of making amends. You heard it, you know, I've confronted people a little bit. I don't do it anymore. I was an asshole for a while within this stuff. And I would confront people and say, hey, you know, what's up, man? You've been doing good for years, you know, and you don't want to do a 4th step now, you're saying? Share at the meeting? Because I don't want to make amends. Screw making amends. And then someone next to them will say, yeah, I'm the same way. I'm not making amends. I'm happy with this place. Good for, you know, go for it. But people come back from recovery every day because they never make amends. But do they say that? They say, I didn't go to enough meetings. So they say, I'm going to go to more meetings. That's why it's important for us that know this message to bring it. Have I ever known someone with long-term recovery, achieve long-term recovery, skipping on amends? Never. Never. Matter of fact, I've said this before many times, and I've had people argue with me about this, not in these type of settings. When we go over recovery rates and stuff, and we say to 75 to 93%, and there's a percentage, small percentage, that do the steps. And my sponsor will be asked, well, what's the percentage of those who do the steps that make it? My sponsor says 100%. I mean, my sponsor will say he's never known anyone that's relapsed and done the steps. And it took me a while to, really? And then one meeting, some guy stood up and he goes, I did the steps. And my sponsor goes, cool, man. Did you make all your amends? No. Another guy stands up, and the next time we went around there, same question. Did you make your amends? Did you do 10 steps every day? No. Did you ever sponsor? No. And you never did the steps. You know, and truly did the steps. We don't, you know, there's one thing between not wanting to sponsor and willing to sponsor. There's something about not wanting to make amends, but willing to make amends. Very important. This book talks about, in the beginning, about sound reasoning with the first drink, right? And that's following thinking that makes sense. what we believe is logical, rational, but we know what the obsession does with that. My question is, can sound reasoning interfere with spiritual development, our relationship with God, doing the steps? Example, I can't tell my secrets to a stranger. They might tell somebody. That's good. That's sound reasoning. Can sound reasoning get in the way of I'm not saying it's good. Can sound reasoning get in the way of making amends? Oh, I can't go make amends to my ex. She might slam a door in my face or turn me to child support. I can't make amends to the cops. They might be suspicious of me. I can't go make amends to stores I stole from. They might call the cops. Some stuff like that you hear. In Bill's story, it says common sense becomes what? Uncommon sense. Is it common sense to go to enemies and make amends? Well, we think that. Is it common sense to go to someone we hurt and face them and honestly admit our mistake or pay back a drug dealer? We think that stuff and go, yeah, it's not common sense to do that. Let's see what the 12 and 12 says. If you have a 12 and 12, it's on page 120. It's on page 23. And this sums it up perfectly without me having to answer it myself. Let's listen to Bill. Who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant? Who wants to confess his shortcomings to another and make restitution for harms done? Who cares anything about higher power, let alone meditation and prayer? Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry the message to the next sufferer? No, the average alcoholic, self-centered in the extreme, doesn't care for these prospects. Unless he's to do these things in order to stay alive himself, there's the answer. We do this stuff not based on sound reasoning. We have to do it to stay alive. And this, let me read what else he says. Under the lash of alcoholism, we were driven to AA and we discovered the fatal nature of our situation. And then and only then do we become open-minded to the conviction, as willing to listen as a dying can be. We stand ready to do anything which will lift this merciless obsession from us. Victory. So we look for a way out by justifying personal reasons why we shouldn't make amends. We balk. Balk. Balk, if you want to know what the word balk means, back in the, and it mentions that some of these we balked. If you look up like an old dictionary, it means when you have an animal that won't walk with you. And it comes from actually a donkey. The people who try to pull a donkey would balk. When they said a donkey is balking would mean you couldn't pull it. So we balk at making amends based on sound reasoning, forgetting that we made a third step decision to no longer make decisions based on self. So the result is 4-7, we connect to God. Now we must trust God. And if we want to grow with God, we need to make amends. I'm working with a guy and they say, hey, Steve, when I make amends, blah, 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 I'm on, what step are we on? And he's all 2. I said, let's focus on 2. People get so focused and preoccupied on a step they're not even on, 4 or 9, before they even get there, that the outcome is already envisioned in their head. And the question that's always asked is that what if? What if is always asked with amends? What if they say this? And it's speculation of a future event. What if? Speculation is based on reasoning, based on insufficient evidence. In other words, a theory, something we haven't experienced. A theory is an accepted belief that we have despite not experiencing it. How many decisions do we make on theory? It's where theories end. So we justify not making amends based on theory, a what if, I guess, what's going to happen. There's no what ifs in recovery. There is, however, absolutes, and we have to look at absolutes. We've read about that, mentioned the absolutes, honesty, love, purity, and all that Oxford group, but absolute is a strong word I look at. And it's something without doubt, a fact, and it never changes. It never changes. So I don't deal with absolutes. I mean, with what ifs, I deal with absolutes. Let me give you an absolute. I hurt people and resented people. That's an absolute. I have a list of names on it. That's an absolute. When someone makes amends, they become free. That's an absolute. Making amends is a key to permanent recovery. That's an absolute. If you don't make them, there's a very good chance you're not going to make it. That is a big absolute. And a big absolute also, it's part of the formula. part of the recipe. Remember, we talked about grandma's cookies. We can sit there and make our own recipe, but then it's our own recipe. It's no longer the greatest cookies in the world. We don't want to write the greatest program in the world. It's not cafeteria style. Step 9 is where beliefs and theories and excuses and what ifs must be thrown in the garbage can. And we pray for that stuff. That's why we're praying for willingness. Something we've never done before. I never prayed for willingness for anything. You know, I prayed for God to give me the new car or the, bail me out of jail somehow. Page 76. Probably there are still some misgivings. So if we have a misgiving about something, it means we have fear, right? Something we're about to do. You believe it's not a good idea. Or I have a misgiving about walking into that fire. I have a fear of it. We need to trust God when making amends, that with an honest desire to let God take us to better things. We did that. We want to get past the fear. We ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what we have as be. That's a great prayer on page 68 to do every day. So probably there are still some misgivings as we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt. We may feel diffident, that's hesitant, about going to some of them. On a spiritual basis, let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on the first approach. That means don't go to the person saying, I'm on a mission from God, or God's walking with me today to make these amends. And we'll get more into that, next week or so about how, what we don't do and don't say, but you put yourself granted as maybe a religious person, and you know what that person feels like that. The person does like religion. They're like, oh, welcome, and they forget everything you say after that. We're not there to do that. We'll get more into that later though. It says at that moment, we're trying to put our lives in order, but that is not in itself. And here's the most important statement. One of the most top 5 in this book. I'm gonna start saying that because people would say, hey, Steve, how many most important statements do you have in this book? But this one right here, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to maximum service to God and the people about us. That's just perfect. The question is, what is a purpose? It's an aim or goal towards something we're striving for. Fit means the proper condition or state one is in physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Fit spiritual condition this book talks about. So a real purpose is to spiritually fit ourselves to maximum service to God and people about us, right? Maximum is the greatest amount possible, maximum. Like this cup, if I fill this cup to the maximum level, it's right to the top. Think about that. It's a big word. Service. I love service. It is to provide duties of help and assistance for others. It's a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift you've always had, and it's a gift God reminds you have, and it's a gift God gave us to begin with. And the reason it's a gift is how you feel after it. You know how someone hands you a birthday gift and it's wrapped and you're like, thank you for the gift, but you open it and you see the gift and you experience the gift. We don't know, it's still wrapped before we do this. We'll eventually know what it's like. Page 63 told us that we have a new employer, and being all powerful, he provided what we needed. If we stay close and perform his work well, he provides what we need. Remember that. So how do I, stay close to God? Well, step 10, 4 through 9 on a regular basis, and step 11, right? And what's his work? Sponsoring. Can I keep close to God if I'm not making amends? Can I do his work and maximum service for others if I'm sitting on a bunch of amends that need to be made? So we do not make amends. Can we be maximum service to God and the people about us? Absolutely not, because there's a big part of our world that's closed off. It's like if you lived in it's like me walking in my backyard and going, I'm going to walk in my neighbor's backyard, and all of a sudden I run into the fence. If there's no fence there, I can walk in, I can walk back there. By making amends, what am I doing? I'm affirming my commitment, which I took in the 3rd step prayer, which is my oath to be a maximum service to God and the people about us. Remember, it said, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me, to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me in the bondage of self, and make ready to thy will. Take my difficulties and victory over them. Here it is. May bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do this will always. I cannot do that if I'm sitting on amends. Either you, I said this to sponsees before, either you mean, did you mean what you said in that third step prayer? You didn't. Either you mean what you say in that third step prayer, you don't. If not, we truly maybe don't want this way of life. You know, I know we do here, but if we meant what we said, then what always matters going forward is truly living life, growing with God and oneness with God. And if you want this, new way of life, amends is one of the prices we pay to do it. It truly links us to the commitment we made in step 3 and 7-step prayer. God, I go up here and do your bidding. Amen. God's bidding, working with others, maximum service. There's no maximum service than greater than working with others. Again, I can't do that if I'm still have unfinished business from the past. I said a little bit ago that a purpose is an aim or a goal towards which we strive for. Where there is a goal, there is an ideal. We talked about ideals a few weeks ago. An ideal is a principle and value that is where within us, always within us, when actually pursued leads to growth. My ideal job, my ideal partner, my ideal friend. But I got to find goals to get there. If I saw Kim as my ideal friend, then my goal to become his friend would be to go to Sweden and hang out with him, right? But with a ideal, it's where we truly want in life. Our goals provide the measurable steps to achieve any ideal. So if a goal is to fit ourselves in maximum service to God and the people about us, what's the ideal? If the goal is to be maximum service to God and people about us, what's the ideal we're trying to reach? Freedom. Freedom. Making amends leads to freedom. And that is the capacity to live life without restriction. An open road leads to an open book. Think about that. Have an open road, you become an open book eventually. My book's pretty boring if you want to read it, but it was tied up and buried in the ground for a long time. One type of freedom we achieve is spiritual freedom by making amends. Remember the spiritual maladies, the inability to connect to the spirit within us? When we do 4 through 7 and we let go and remove a lot of stuff that stands between God and I, anger, resentment, hate, jealousy, selfishness, but some things sometimes remain. Self-pity. If self-pity is there, you might have a little depression, misery, restless, irritable, and discontent at times, fear, maybe a little bit, maybe obsession most likely is still there. And the reason I might still have that stuff is because I have guilt from the harms I've done. That deep emotion of shame from what? Committing a past wrong. It's eating me up inside. I have heard people call guilt a useless emotion because you can't do anything about it. It's already taken place. But guess what? We can. It's never too late to change things. Because we can fix it. I can go to the physical world and make amends. Amends, it not only clears away the guilt, when it clears away the guilt, gone the remorse, the regret, the shame. It might come back again, but we have step 10 to take care of that. The depression. What causes all that? Fear to begin with. The book says when the spiritual malady is overcome, we shout mentally and physically. It's cannot happen without making amends. I love what the author group founder Sam Shoemaker said. Our relationship with God cannot be right unless our relations with others right as well. For it is pointless to keep in touch with God so as long as there's human relations which must be rightened at the same time. Wow. Straightforward to the point. That's one freedom, freedom with God. Another freedom is making amends is the physical world. If we don't make no effort to make amends, there's a lot of people, places, and things to avoid. And if I'm avoiding people, places, and things, then I'm going to start to believe what I hear in the fellowship, that I'm powerless to people, places, and things. People that say that never made amends. If I want to be free in the outside world, I need to go make amends and clean up my side of the street. I'm not there to tell them what they did or clean up their side of the street. I don't, want to walk. Here's my life is I don't want to walk on the other side of the street ever again because that person's there on the other side I harmed. I don't want to leave a meeting because that person might come. I've been there before, or when I was in my other sabbaticals in AA. I don't want to be at a party and looking around in fear that this person's going to walk in. I don't want to get that feeling in my stomach ever again because I might see a certain face. I don't want to leave a family gathering and not go to a wedding or something because that person might be coming, or skip on my kid's birthday because the ex is going to be there. And I don't want to look over my shoulder ever again. I want to be able to walk down the street, not skip the blocks around because I harmed that person. I want to go to the social events. I don't want to be at Walmart or some store and all of a sudden I see that person have to hide down the other aisle. I want to be able to go to the places I stole from because I want to have an open world. There's no recovery if I'm dodging people, places, and things. Because of amends, a large area of my life, well, let's say a huge area, maximum area of my life is completely closed off, is wide open now. When all this crap is gone, we have freedom. We can go anywhere we want to go. And when that happens, I'll be sitting, the difference is at the point of your 11th step, when you go to sit down your 11th step one night and you feel it's great, but there's one night when you made a really good amends and you're still in that cloud and you go to your 11th step and you're in meditation and you realize you finally found peace, all by cleaning up your side of the street. So all in all, breaking that a little more down into nuggets is there's 4 freedoms here. Freedom from guilt, to remove that between God and I. The geographical freedom with places, and freedom with people. And when we get all those straightened out, we get freedom with God. And we receive freedom within and in the outside world, we can be maximum service to God and the people about us. Meaning I cannot grow, I can finally grow within, and I can start living on God's terms, oneness with God. And my thinking starts becoming one with God's thinking. Most of the time, or a little bit of the time, even some of the time. But freedom's a beautiful thing. Absolutely beautiful thing. So next week, we're going to discuss how to properly make amends, wording wise, what we say, and most important, what we do not say. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.